What's going on, everybody? We are back. We have episode number 142 of the Club and Sub podcast. This week, we're going to be talking UFC Vegas 77 and whether or not it's the worst card ever. Lags,
It's up for debate.
Do you think this is the worst fight night on paper that we've ever had booked?
So it's funny because I know you tweeted this out earlier, so I instantly looked this up because this is the card that everybody always compares it to, is the Jessica I and Cynthia Calvillo fight, right? So right. I looked that card up. All right, so the two best fights on that card, you had Marvin Vettori, Carl Roberson as the co-main event, and then you also had Andre Fili and Charles Jourdain,
which was a good fight.
Those were your two best fights, and your two biggest name guys fights. Merab was on the card too, but it was a nothing fight. So yeah, I would say this is on paper probably the worst fight night card.
I mean, this is awful. Like, even looking at it on paper, I would say, look, I have a few bets, but like fights that I'm actually excited for, not many. Like, I guess the obvious take is McKinney Sadov, but I expect that fight to probably be over in 3 to 6 minutes. You know, I'm not expecting some drag it out, slug it out war. So yeah, it's ugly. I don't know what they're doing here. You know what the worst part is? My wife and I have an engagement party we're attending Saturday night. And I was like, you know what? Not the worst thing ever. I don't really care if I miss this card. It's like, yeah, you know, we'll be back by 10 or 11 because that's what parents of two kids do. It's like, maybe I'll get back just in time to see Holly Holm. Then I check, and the main card doesn't start till 10. Like, what are we actually fucking doing having this card? The main event.
I didn't know that. I didn't realize that.
Of this card is scheduled at this moment to start at 12:45 a.m. How to not get people to watch your fights, like in a nutshell right here. But anyway, yeah.
I'd have people fall asleep right around 1 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not a very good card, but I've got bets on it. Lag's got bets on it, so we're going to break it down anyway. Real quick, we can break down last week. UFC 290, maybe the best card I've ever seen. It was an amazing card, top to bottom. I lost a unit and a half on it. Unfortunately, I just ended up way too tied to that Shannon Ross and Aguilar fight. I had a unit on the over. I had a half unit on Ross by decision, and I had a unit on Ross. Took a bath there. Had 2 units Kamuela Kirk. Honestly, I thought his cardio would hold up a bit better at 55. We saw no improvement whatsoever there. I lost about 0.6 units on Marcin Prachnio. So things were going really bad for me. And then I had a nice little rally to close the night. Had a 0.53 unit bet on Robbie Lawler, plus 190 hit. Had a 0.63 unit bet on Dan Hooker, plus 250 hit. And then had a 1 unit bet on Volk ITD, plus 250 also hit. So it was a unit and a half loss, but it felt like a win with the way that it started.
Just an absolute roller coaster.
Yeah. How did you do, Lags?
So just slight profit, 0.6 units for me, or 0.61 units, I should say. And we'll start with the losses first. The over 1.5 rounds in the Robbie Lawler fight, Nico Price. I mean, we talked about it a little bit right after. I'm not gonna say it was or wasn't a dive, but it just looked like the finishing sequence looked really bad, really poor.
And then they had the Lawler retirement video queued up right after.
Yeah, like Nico, here's like $200K for all your kids and everything. Just take a dive real quick, and we'll have this post-fight speech. But yeah, I had the under 2.5 rounds in the Hooker Turner fight. That was a war. I honestly couldn't believe Dan ate the shots that he did. And then I had 3 wins in a row here. Or I guess I should say not 3 in a row. I should say the last 3 bets here were wins. The under 2.5 rounds in the Duplessis Whitaker fight.
Great.
And then in the main event, the fight doesn't go the distance, and Volk spread -5.5. Honestly, hindsight, but like the Volk -5.5 spread should have been probably a bigger bet at -160.
Oh yeah, he was going to easily cover it even if it went the distance. So
yep, exactly.
Yeah, Volk's to go. But yeah.
Yep.
We won't wait. Although I don't really mind wasting that much time with this card that we're about to break down. So
Volk was great, man.
That was awesome.
Yep.
And we have the Battle for Africa happening soon, which is really
I'm just here for like the press conference. That's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Just the build up. It's gonna be great.
Anyway, let's jump into this card. First fight of the night.
Yep.
We got Ashley Evans Smith taking on Eileen Perez. Some crazy line movement here. Perez opened -450. She dropped all the way to about -130, and now she's back out to -220. I don't really have any interest in betting this fight either way. What I will say is I've seen a lot of passion on the Perez side here. And I guess on some level, I do get it. I mean, Ashley Evans Smith hasn't fought in 3 years. Obviously, she had a major injury. If you look at her Instagram, it doesn't look like she's taking MMA particularly seriously. She's a full-time podcaster, has an OnlyFans, seems more concerned with doing content than anything else. Doesn't seem like she's in the gym much. And she's 36 years old. So I would say the floor for Ashley Evans Smith in this fight is subterranean. So I get her being an underdog here. At the same time, though, I mean, Eileen Perez is, in my opinion, one of the least skilled fighters on the roster, either men's or women's. Yeah, I respect that she's fun, she's quirky, she's very aggressive, but I don't think she has any good skills. She wants to grapple, but she's not a great wrestler. She's a terrible striker. She's a poor submission grappler. She's just aggressive. And with where Ashley Evans Smith is in her career and the unknowns around her, I understand wanting to back that tenacity and aggression. But at the same time, I think about it and yeah, Smith looked horrible in her last fight, but it was against Norma Dumont. Norma Dumont would easily punk Eileen Perez. Smith 3 fights ago had a very competitive fight with Ketlin Vieira. And I just keep thinking about this and it's yeah, I agree. Smith could just be, there's a high probability she's just shot and gets run over here. But is anybody really that surprised if Smith just completely detrains Perez here? She fought Veronica Macedo, and Macedo had brought a similar game to the table that Perez did, and Smith just absolutely abused her and finished her. Now, that was many years ago, and maybe she doesn't have that in her, but Smith was a college wrestler. I mean, she's obviously, at her best, far more skilled than Perez is. I'm picking Perez to win, again, for the aforementioned uncertainties around Smith at her age, but I do not understand being passionate about laying a big number on Eileen Perez. What do you think, Lags?
I would be passionate about laying a big number on Perez, but I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the week, as a good buddy of the pod, John Martian, would say. I think Ashley Evans Smith's a role player, really. I mean, when we talked about it a little bit, she's a girl fights once a year, has an OnlyFans, 50-50 girl, doesn't seem like she's taking it that seriously. I think Perez probably with the wrestling and the tenacity can probably win the decision, but yeah, I'm not passionate about it.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on. I'll start with you here, Lags. We got Carl Deaton III taking on Alex Munoz. Deaton, you'll recall, was a short notice fill-in to get murdered by Joe Selecki last time out. Munoz, the wrestling coach, team out for a while. He's been off for about 3 years. Munoz coming in as a minus 175 favorite right now. Come back on Deaton, plus 155. What are your thoughts here, Lags?
So I did see, so he had, like you mentioned, he was off 3 years. He did tear his ACL after his last fight, so partially why he was in that time off. Yeah. I think it is a good fight for Munoz, and I understand why people are steaming him at minus 140, but at minus 175 where it's at now, I wouldn't love a play on it. Just, I understand the wrestling dynamic here and there, but his control's not that great, and his standing, I mean, he's pretty hittable. Not that Deaton's a super high volume guy. I think he's pretty shit overall. Pretty bad takedown defense. I think he just doesn't bring much to the table, but he can crack. But yeah, I think it should be a good fight for Munoz.
Yeah. I considered playing Munoz earlier in the week when he was lower at minus 140 and ultimately decided to pass. I guess my view is, you're right. Deaton's wrestling, it's not very good, but at the same time, Munoz is really a classic wrestle boxer type. He's going to come in there. He's going to look to box with you in the pocket and take you down. The problem is most of these college wrestlers who transition to MMA, it doesn't even seem like he really practices jiu-jitsu. It's fairly easy to just give your back to Munoz and stand right up against him. And to me, that's a bit of a concern because I think he can get Deaton down at will here. I have very little doubt that he can get many, many takedowns. But if he's not consolidating position, you look at the guys that held Deaton down regionally and Selecki, and they're guys with good jiu-jitsu and control. And Munoz just doesn't have that, as you touched on. And if they're standing up, yes, I think you have to edge the fight to Munoz because of that takedown equity. But if they're standing up, I don't think it's that wide a fight. Munoz, he's a better athlete and maybe could have success there. But I also, I have this feeling that, Deaton's getting slept on a bit here. The guy's got some good wins. He went to a split with Alejandro Flores 2 years ago. Flores is a decent striker. He beat Justin James, beat Nate Williams, went to a decision with Chepe Mariscal, went to a decision with Vince Murdoch. The guy, he's got a lot of fights, and he's fought an okay quality of competition for a guy who, a lot of people just don't consider UFC level, myself included. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, yes, I think Munoz has the tools to win this fight fairly handedly. And if Munoz was like a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, I'd make him a gigantic favorite because I think it would be pretty easy to consolidate position, get Deaton's back and whatnot. But I expect Deaton to get up pretty consistently here. And with that dynamic, and I don't think Munoz has much stopping power. So I don't know. I kind of think Deaton could keep the margins a bit closer than what the line indicates. But I mean, I don't really have any interest in betting Carl Deaton. Moving on, we got Azat Maxim. Is he Tajikistan or Kazakh? Yeah, he's from Kazakhstan.
Kazakh.
Taking on Tyson Nam. Maxim, gigantic favorite here, minus 415. Come back on Nam, plus 315 here. What's going on, Tim Troiano? Good to see you in the chat. Yeah, I don't know. If Nam was like 33, I'd probably, just take a sprinkle at him just on principle because Nam's a far more experienced fighter who's fought way better guys. And we have this Kazakh guy coming off a horrible regional scene, chalked up at minus 400. But Nam's not 33. He's 40 years old. And to compound things, there's not really a ton of tape of Nam grappling, which is kind of concerning because Maxim he's one of these classic Eastern European guys. That's all he really wants to do is just attempt takedowns, rinse, wash, and repeat. I think Maxim has some flaws. I think he's hittable on the feet. And I think in terms of his wrestling, he's like a poor man's Mokaev to me. He's got decent cardio and he'll pursue the takedowns, but I think he's a worse wrestler than Mokaev, and I think he's a worse control grappler. And so like that kind of made me like lean towards the Nam side at the price. But again, Nam's 40. He's coming off getting KO'd. This kid's young and hungry and is going to go for it. Plus he has the kind of process you need to cover the minus 400 price tag. I'm not going to go in on this pre. I think I'd rather see how Nam holds up defensively grappling. And then maybe make a decision live. What are your thoughts?
I think if there was a bet to be made here, it'd probably be the under 2.5 rounds, if anything.
Yeah.
But like even that doesn't tempt me a ton. But yeah, I think Maxim in general, he hits hard on the feet. He's pretty fast, and I think, like you touched on a bit, I think he does have that grappling upside. Yeah, not much really to add. But I would much rather play the under 2.5 than minus 140.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on, Legs. I'll stick with you here. We got Gennaro Valdez taking on Evan Elder. Elder, big favorite here, minus 280. Come back on Valdez, plus 240. Any thoughts here?
I think it's pretty justified, honestly. Like, I think in the striking, I think Elder has him covered, and I think he has a massive edge in the wrestling, too. So, yeah, I don't have too much interest there. And even, like, the over 1.5, minus 150, Valdez is headable enough that that's not tempting.
Yeah, I agree. I'll say this. If you told me for a fact that, like, Elder was just going to stand with him, I'd probably sprinkle the Valdez price just because I do think Elder's a pretty good striker. I think he's a decent prospect, and I don't think Valdez is a very good striker. But, I mean, we've seen Elder get himself involved in wars. Like, he's not going to shy away from a war. We saw that with the Nazim fight, who we'll talk about later in this card. And if Elder got himself into a war with Valdez, I do think Valdez hits hard, That like I would just kind of take the stab on principle. But to your point, I mean, Elder's got the wrestling in his back pocket, and Valdez's grappling is atrocious. If Elder needs to go to that, he can. I think the price is fine. He should take care of business. Not a whole lot.
Yeah, I think he's got a pretty massive cardio advantage too, to add on to that.
Agreed. And I think he's got a durability edge, honestly, as well.
Yeah.
He looks like he ate the shots from Nazim pretty easily. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of boxes you can check here for a minus 300, for him to be minus 300, I should say.
Yeah, I completely agree. Moving on. Jack Della Maddalena, for some reason, getting put on this card and against the debutante, who is Basil Hafez. And this is actually somewhat of an interesting fight, and one that where is the freaking line for this fight? I'm trying to find it.
I didn't see it at all. I didn't see it either. I was looking at fight odds, and I'm like, I don't.
That's what I'm looking at right now.
I'm like, is John talking in the right order here?
Oh, here we go. Jack Della Maddalena minus 515. Come back on Hafez plus 390. There's some plus 440s out there, like DraftKings, that you can grab. I am like moderately tempted to like take a tiny poke at the Hafez side. I may end up pulling back from that. I don't know, because I was really hoping after the way Jack was lined for his fight that was booked last week that we'd get something similar here up in the minus 900 or so range. And then I would definitely just take a stab at Hafez. Jack's better. I mean, he should win this fight. Don't get me wrong. But Basil Hafez is very physically strong. He's very explosive. And he's actually a really, really good grappler if he gets on top of you. And so I think there is some scope here for Hafez getting Jack down early and potentially submitting him. The reason why I'm waffling with it is because I really think he needs to submit him early because Hafez's gas tank is one of the worst I've ever seen. Like I find it hard to believe that in a short notice fight, if he doesn't get Jack out of there early, that he's going to have the gas tank to get him down multiple times later in this fight. And I do think if Jack clears round one, he probably takes over and finishes him. And he might even finish him in round one. You know, if Hafez doesn't get him down right away, Jack's just going to wail on this guy. But I do think the fact that Hafez does have the jiu-jitsu pedigree that he has, and that Jack has basically no discernible jiu-jitsu pedigree, does make it interesting and make like a dog stab tempting. Doesn't look like we have any props out for this yet. I'm kind of interested to see what Hafez sub round one comes out at. I don't think it'll be that great, but if it is a huge price, I might take a poke at that. But as of now, no play here. I mean, Jack, I think -3, -400 is probably fair. What do you think, Lags?
I honestly haven't taped this Hafez guy.
All right. There we go. Well, that makes that simple.
Yes.
Well, moving on, I'll throw it to you here. We got Melozikal, Costa taking, or Melk Zikal, Costa taking on Austin Lingo. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Melky Costa. I feel like this, in my opinion, like my read on this fight is just more so of a fade of Lingo, because I feel like Lingo is just one-dimensional boxer that just kind of needs you to stand in front of him. And I think Melk has decent striking, has good power, has good wrestling and grappling as well. So, like, I think he could cover the number. Kind of similarly to a fight we talked about earlier, I'd rather play the under, I think, if anything here. But this fight's a pass for me as well.
Yeah, I considered laying the chalk on Costa here, and ultimately why I decided not to do it is he doesn't grapple proactively enough for me, and he can get himself into brawls. I think on paper, like you just touched on, Lingo is a one-dimensional boxer, and he strikes me as a guy, like, you go watch the Zalal fight, anybody who just plays kind of an outside kicking-based game, he just doesn't have a lot of answers for it. He doesn't cut the cage very well. He doesn't have a lot of tools to keep you in front of him. But if you go into the fire with him, he is a good boxer. He does hit hard, and I could see him having success in there. Again, I think Costa's got all the tools to cover this. I think his kicking game is superior. Like, he should be able to get off at will on the outside. I think if he wants, he can take him down pretty easily and potentially submit him, but I don't really rely on him to do that. And at -200, you know, I want my -200 to be going to the most optimal path available, and I don't trust him to do that. But I think Costa should win here. I don't think it's that interesting of a fight. Moving on. Estela Nunez, Victoria Dudikova. Lags, what are your thoughts here?
Somewhat of an interesting fight. Like, we were just, going from that fight to this fight now. I think this is pretty similar to a fight we had a couple weeks ago with the Luana Carolina, where we have a fairly green wrestler grappler taking on a girl that has UFC experience. I think it's a no-brainer shot on the Nunez, on the underdog. I think just in general, people just think she has bad takedown defense, and I think it's more so based on the cardio than anything. I think she does have good first-level takedown defense. I think early in this fight, it's going to be hard for Dudikova to hold her down, so +220 was an easy spot.
Yeah, I have similar price. I think I have +250 on her, on Nunez. I wouldn't play the current price, but I do agree with you. I think what's interesting is obviously the cardio is the entire narrative around this fight and where the line is, where it is. I think what's interesting about that is if you go back to her first fight in the UFC against Carnelossi, she was probably on her way to winning that fight and was winning round 3 before she got her back taken late in the round and got submitted. You know, her cardio, she was slowing, but she was still, getting up from the takedown, separating and landing offense. Even the next fight against Hughes, without you could make a real case. She won rounds 1 and 2 there. She won round 1 easy. Round 2 was a very competitive round. And even round 3 prior to the takedown, they were fairly competitive. And the one thing to note about both of those fights and her last fight with Yasmin Oregi is they were fought at absolutely blistering paces. Hughes pressured her the entire fight, saved to the Carnelossi, and Oregi just came right at her. So, yeah, I mean, look, Nunez has bad cardio. There's no question about that. For a female, like, I'm not going to make the argument she doesn't. But I also think it's perhaps being overstated a bit just because of the nature of the fight she's been in. Whereas Dudikova, I don't think Dudikova has a lot to offer her on the feet here at all. And I am not really sold that Dudikova is going to be able to overpower her inside in the manner Carnelossi was. And if she can't, I could see Estela having like large amounts of success in finishing or just winning the first 2 rounds and riding out round 3. I think it's a very competitive fight here. I like the Nunez side. I understand liking Dudikova, but again, guys, like Lags touched on, you go back to the Carolina fight, man, the women, this woman has been like mugging are just not good. Maria Silva's not bad, but she was death gassed in that fight. She completely gassed
And
out.
Dudikova was a huge dog in that fight.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like you're making some large assumptions that she's going to come in here and just easily bully Estela Nunez around. I don't think that's likely. So, yeah, I mean, give me the Nunez side here, but I'd pass the current price. Moving on, I have, again, I'd pass the current price here. Tucker Lutz, Melsik Bagdasaryan. I have some early Lutz prices here, pretty small. I'm not passionate about it. I think Lutz is a pretty poor fighter. Striking, it's very, very wooden. It's pretty much reliant on a check left hook and a right low kick. And I do think he can be a bit hittable. And obviously Melsik is a very explosive kickboxer. The thing is, I'm not sure Melsik's much more than that. We know the guy's got bad cardio. We've seen that before. I think his grappling is trash, to be quite honest. The way Dennis Bazooka just bullied him in round 2 of their contenders fight was concerning. You could say, well, maybe he's improved, but then you go and you watch that Kulabau fight, and the way the finishing sequence happened, Melsik fell on the ground. Kulabau jumped on top. He actually had his arm underneath Kulabau and could have easily gone out the back door. Instead, he panicked, pulled the arm back in, and then fought the wrong hand on the choke and got himself submitted. I look at his grappling, and it just seems to me like a guy who has no idea what he's doing down there. And then, in addition to having a bad gas tank, and then you look at his coach, it's Edmund Taravangian, Rhonda and Edmund Shabazian's coach for all those years. I mean, he's widely known as one of the worst coaches in MMA. You go look at Edmund Shabazian and look at his grappling and how poor it is. And it's just something I can't unsee here. So, as much as I know Melsik's the much flashier striker than Lutz is and more dangerous, but who has Melsik really put a stamp on other than Colin Englund, who's not in the UFC anymore? Yeah, Melsik should win the striking here, but we've seen Lutz attempt takedowns in volume before. I think Lutz could potentially dominate if he gets him down. I think he has a pretty giant cardio edge. Again, I think the current number is about right, but I do not think I am not really a fan of Melsik's game. What do you think, Legs?
Yeah, similarly, I'll say to what you said there is I'm not a fan of Melsik's game. I'm really never want to lay big juice on him, really. But conversely, I mean, Lutz is hittable, doesn't offer much on the feet. I think he's a bit gassy himself. I think, while you touched a little bit on the Kulov fight, the finishing sequence, at least early in that fight, though, Melsik was having the range dictating the range pretty solidly there. I think he could do similarly here with Lutz. I think he land big shots, probably finish him. I feel like Lutz's durability is not the best either. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that. Moving on, though, I'll keep it with you here. We got Terrence McKinney taking on Nazim Sadikov. This is actually a cool fight for as long as it lasts. Current price, Sadikov minus 135. Comeback on McKinney plus 115. What are your thoughts here?
It's a cool fight for a lot of reasons, and I think it's intriguing for a lot of reasons too, because at least from the McKinney side, I do think that I think he could knock Nazim out early in his fight, and I think I'm not going to say he could have grappling success, because I think if he goes to the grappling, he's probably going to end up gassing himself out, but I think more than likely he could find an early KO here. But it's also going from that last fight, fighting at the pace that he did in that fight, getting knocked out in the fashion that he did. It's just interesting to see how he'll approach it in this fight.
Yeah.
So it's a complete stay away for me. I don't understand. I mean, I get why people were steaming the under. It's a Terrence McKinney fight, but I feel like this, kind of what I said from the last fight, how he's going to dictate the pace. I think a starts round 2 could be interesting, but overall it's a pass.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I've gone back and forth in my head about it and whether I should bet the Nazim side, because I bet Bonfim against him last fight against McKinney, and on the one hand, I do think, for the most part, McKinney is a guy who I just don't think you can trust to manage his gas tank effectively. He tried to do it last fight and got himself finished. And so I'm immediately tempted by the minus 135 on Nazim because he pushes a pace, he throws hard, he'll hit the body, all things you want against McKinney. And, when you're thinking about it that way, it's well, how much equity does McKinney really have early in this fight? Does he have enough to offset, 58, 57% implied on the Nazim side? And I would be inclined to say no, but then, man, then you look at Nazim and it's the guy is so, I mean, they're both hittable as fuck, but Nazim is very hittable. I mean, so is Terrence, but if McKinney comes out like a bat out of hell here, are we sure a first 7-minute finish for McKinney isn't like a 40% outcome? Like, are we 100% sure about that? Because I'm not sure about that. And I, like that's what I've kind of been struggling with and trying to like put a finger on when cappings. It's like, how likely is an early McKinney finish? Because everybody's general assumption has been here, like, yeah, you know what? It can't possibly be that high, but it's like, can it not be? The guy's got like 11 first-round finishes. He's clearly a very, very dangerous fighter. And to compound things on the other side of that, I keep saying it every time McKinney fights, and one of these days I'll be right, but one of these days, a gassed out Terrence McKinney is going to grind someone out grappling. Like, he's a very good wrestler. The problem is, just like everything else he does, McKinney doesn't know how to manage his energy when he's wrestling. Everything is big explosive movements instead of, working his way into positions. Do I think he'll be here? No. I mean, I lean the Nazim side. I can't, I have those same concern. I can't really bet McKinney at plus 115 here. If he was at like plus 200 for the fight, I would get involved with McKinney. But yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. I think it's a complicated fight. I've debated whether or not to bet Nazim, but I think there's a really good chance that McKinney's going to put him in trouble early in this fight. So I don't know. Do I really want to bet minus 135, or do I want to kind of wait and see how it plays out early, Or do I want to bet McKinney decision plus 1100?
There you go, John. I was just going to say, I'm like, yeah, I was saying on draft. I was actually just looking at the props for this fight just because we're waffling a little bit about the fight. McKinney by decision on DraftKings is 12-1.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I don't feel strongly about it because I do think Nazim is a bit overrated. He's been getting like a lot of hype for coming out of the Serra-Longo camp, and I just don't really see it when I watch him. Like I guess I see it. He's a good athlete and he hits hard and he's explosive, but I do not see when I look at Nazim, I'm not like, this guy's a future top 10 guy at lightweight. I just don't see that at all.
Yep.
And McKinney's made a living out of, knocking out mid-tier lightweights early in fights. So, yeah, I mean, I'll probably pass it. Moving on. Sorry, God, I am sick of shit today. We got Otman Itar taking on Francisco Prado. I have a small bet on Itar here. Unit plus 115. I think he's good to about minus 125 personally. I'm not like passionate about it. And like Itar, I've been very vocal on this podcast about thinking the Itar brothers are terrible. That hasn't really changed from my perspective. Obviously, we got him last fight, but Francisco Prado, yeah, that was awesome. But at 21 years old, Francisco Prado's young, and in theory, he could be making improvements fight. He should be making improvements fight to fight realistically. But I got to say, I was very unsure of this kid off the regional scene because he's from the Argentinian regional scene, which is one of the worst collective groups there is.
And we talked about Eamon Perez earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Same deal. Yep. It's all just bums down there. And then he comes in, he fights Jamie Malarkey. And Jamie Malarkey, look, he's a decent lightweight. He does some things well. He's strong. He's physical. He can grapple a bit. He is not a point striker. The guy's a brawler normally who's very, very easy to hit. And you see Prado come out there and Malarkey's literally just standing on the outside prodding him he took him down and got like 4 minutes of control. But for the rest of that fight, he pretty much just had his way playing the point striking game on the outside. Prado in 11 minutes of distance time landed 28 strikes, which again, like, look, I would favor Malarkey against the Itar, but it's like, I would expect more offense than that, especially from a guy that's as aggro as Prado is, on top of which he gassed out in that fight, despite the pace being basically nothing. And I look at him and it just seems like he has no idea like what he's doing out there. It's a lot of really, really wild hooks, a lot of hitting air. I'm not very impressed with Prado at all. Like, to me, for him to get to UFC level, he's got to make gigantic improvements. And on the Itar side, I'm not really sure Otman Itar is UFC level. I really do not like Itar, but what we do know is he's fought in the aggregate much better competition than Jamie Malarkey has. Or not Jamie Malarkey, sorry. He's fought, God, I'm losing it right now. He's fought much better competition than Francisco Prado has. I think his game is also very flawed. I don't think he's a very good grappler. I'm not sure he's durable at all either. And obviously he's coming off a brutal first round knockout, but he's got decent boxing on the inside. His hands can be pretty fast. He has a lot of power in them. He's translated that power against decent competition as well. Like I look at these two guys and I'm like, if they're fighting in close, whose boxing do I trust more? I trust his Itar's a lot more. It's like, do I trust Prado to execute some kind of inside out game, and pick her apart? Not really. I know he can't do that. It's like, could Prado grapple him? Maybe he could land a takedown or two, but I'd be a bit surprised by him having huge grappling success. And I think they're both gas bags. Like I've at least seen a Itar win a fight past the first round, whereas, Prado, almost all of his fights have ended very, very, very quickly. Yeah, I'm not passionate about it, but I feel pretty confident that, a Itar has, more technical striking and hits as hard, if not harder. And he's fought better guys. Like to me, you have to make a Itar a small to moderate favorite here. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a volatile fight, honestly. I mean, I think it's just these two guys are likely just going to swing, and who goes down first, honestly. Like I don't have many thoughts on that. I think the under 1.5, honestly, even at minus 160 is probably not bad because these guys are probably going to come out swinging. Both are not that durable. Both have big power. I don't expect a lot of grappling like you touched on. I think it's not bad.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Moving on. Keep it here with you, Lags. Norma Dumont taking on Chelsea Chandler. Dumont at the moment is a minus 143 favorite. Comeback on Chandler plus 123. What are your thoughts?
I've been a Norma hater for like a while now, and not that I'm not in this fight, but I think this is a pretty good fight. For her, I should say. I like on the feet. Chandler's not much of a great striker, I should say. Sorry. And then in the wrestling, it's not that great in my opinion. I think Norma can keep it standing. I expect it to be sort of closer. Like I wouldn't love laying juice on Norma, but like I think it's a decent fight for her.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on it. Because I feel like, to your point, if Norma decides she wants to take Chandler down, she's going to get her down here, likely very easily. And I feel like that could just be a path to utter domination here, is her just getting Chandler down repeatedly and riding her out on the bottom. But obviously you have the gas tank concerns with Norma if she goes that route. On the feet, I think Norma's striking, it's a bit, I don't mind Chandler's boxing, and obviously she hits very hard, but I think Norma's striking is a bit sharper, and Chandler is a lot more hittable than Norma is. So, I mean, I would favor her there. The thing that concerns me and why I didn't bet Norma, I do like the work that Chandler does in the clinch. I mean, she is a large woman for featherweight, and she can bully women in the clinch, and I could see her getting inside on Norma here, pressing her to the cage, and just kind of implementing a similar game to what Macy Chiasson implemented against Norma, and then just absolutely taking over down the stretch of this fight. I can very easily picture that. But again, I can't bet Chandler. I mean, the reality is Chandler's one quality win is Julia Stolyarenko, who is nowhere near Dumont's level and is about to have a fight at flyweight. Dumont's been fighting women at this level for a long time. She's got pretty good metrics. She's fast. She hits hard. I think you have to make her a favorite here. I just can't feel strongly about it. I lean Dumont, but again, if Chandler out cardios her or just cage presses her for a bit, I won't be shocked. So
I think Norma's just kind of I think most women in this, like in the weight class now, are just in a weird spot because it's like, in terms of like fading Norma, like who are you trying to fade her with? You know what I mean?
I agree. I completely agree. Moving on though, we got Albert Duraev taking on Jin Young Park. I've been like toying whether or not to bet Park or just try to go at it live. He's currently minus 148, comeback on Duraev plus 128. As with every Duraev fight, I think there is a very clear dynamic to the fight. Duraev has a chance to do some damage early in this fight, get Park down, work him there. But if Duraev tries to push, a heavy grappling pace, he's very likely to gas. I think what'll be interesting is if and when Duraev gets on top of Park does tend to give his back up to get up here. And something I noticed from tape a bit is that Duraev rarely decides to put hooks in. I think he's capable of it. But if he doesn't, Park might just be able to just stand up like fairly easily. And if that happens, I think he's the much better striker here. Just more volume, sharper on the counter, obviously much better gas tank. But I do think if Duraev puts hooks in, it could be the possibility of derive riding him out on the mat or subbing him for a round or two is fairly live. I just don't really rate derive that much. He's an older fighter. He's not very durable. He's got bad cardio. He's got poor striking. He pretty much is reliant on getting his grappling, dominating via grappling, and the guy just doesn't have the gas tank to implement that game plan. So I'm considering a park play. I haven't decided if I'll go that route or just maybe wait to go live. What are you thinking?
Yeah, we talked about this right before we started the pod. I think a good way to target Park would be round 3 decision, around plus 140, just because in general, Park doesn't have a ton of finishing upside. I mean, like, I understand derive super hittable cardio aspect. I understand that, but like, I just feel like in general, Park down the stretch probably takes over, getting good plus money on it.
Yeah, I don't mind the 2-3 KO looks either there. I think that's an interesting poke. Moving on the legs, I'll keep it with you. Main event of the evening, the main event nobody wanted. We got Holly Holm minus 177. Comeback on Mayra Bueno Silva. Mayra Bueno Silva is plus 152. What are your thoughts here?
Like we touched on to start the pod, this fight is going to be going off around probably 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So going to be great. Going to be great for everybody to fall asleep to probably. I think it's a good spot for Holm. I think anybody who got in, like I know you're going to touch on here, that minus 140, minus 150 range on Holm, I think that's solid. I think she has the volume edge here across 5 rounds. I think she has the grappling edge, cardio edge. I mean, Bueno Silva is pretty much all physicality, and Holm is going to match her in that physicality, match her in the cardio. I mean, Holm has pretty much every box you want to check really here in a 5-round fight. So, yeah, big step down in competition as well for Holm. So,
yeah, I bet Holm big. I actually still think there's a decent amount of value on her line. It's one of the biggest bets I've ever made for a women's fight.
Wow. All right,
not the
John.
biggest.
All right,
Carla against Rose was bigger than that, but
so John's hoping for another snooze fest here.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, my view is you really, for this line to make sense, Holmes really got to go over a cliff here. Like, the only real argument I see for the line making sense is Holmes 41. And she is 41. And if you don't really want to normally be betting against a 31-year-old with a 41-year-old at juice, like, I'll admit that right off the bat. I will say, though, from a macro perspective, like, the 41 thing is concerning. But first of all, we saw her fight 3 months ago. She looked fine against Yana, dominated that fight. And I mean, I think Yana provides more challenges in the clinch than Mayra Bueno Silva does personally. Beyond that, it's like, this isn't a case of Holmes 41 and taking on Ketlin again, or taking on Irene Aldana or Raquel Pennington. She's 41 and she's fighting Mayra Bueno Silva, who, I mean, Mayra Bueno Silva has been fighting nobodies. Outside of her fight with Fiorot at 125 a couple years ago, her last 3 fights are Lena Landsberg, who is terrible, was never that good to begin with, but now is terrible. Stephanie Egger, who she armbarred a minute in, and a competitive fight with Wu Yanan. You know, the truth is, Holmes been fighting at the top of the women's 135-pound division for 8 years now. Mayra Bueno Silva has been fighting mid to low tier fighters for pretty much her entire career, and not really even blowing them away. You know, you look at the stats on this fight, you know, Silva gets out attempted 1.5 to 1 per minute. She gets outlanded by a strike a minute against this level of competition, whereas Holm is out attempting and outlanding her opponents. Silva hits hard for a woman, but she's got no KOs. I don't even think she has any knockdowns in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken. I look at it and I feel like the best place that Silva can win this fight is catching a submission, because I do think Silva has a very slick guard. She's got 4 submissions off her back in her career in the UFC, which is a lot. Obviously, she's very slick down there, and we have seen Holly get submitted before. So Holly getting caught, you know, I'm not as worried about an armbar. I am a bit worried about, you know, the knee bar, just because I think it requires a bit more patience than the armbar does to get out of, and just a bit more technique. But short of that, like, actually look at the grappling in this fight. You know, Holm has controlled 4 of her last 6 opponents for 8 minutes or more. You know, if she decides to go to the grappling here, she's going to be able to control Mayra on the fence. And Mayra on her back, she's very dangerous in guard, as I mentioned. But if you get past her guard, like if you pass it, she has nothing there. Like, go rewatch the Fiorot fight. When Fiorot like gets through her guard, she literally is just like turtling up on her stomach and getting like walloped down there. We saw Montana De La Rosa hold her down there for a round. We saw Wu Yanan hold her down there for multiple minutes. You know, we saw Marina Moroz hold her down there for multiple minutes. This is a woman who every time she ends up on her back, if she's not hitting a sub, she's just losing rounds. And I'm not even sure, like, and first, and also on top of that, I don't think Holly should even take her down at all, because you look at Holly here, and Holly uses those blitzing in and out attacks similar to Fioro from Southpaw, and Mayra just doesn't really have the answers to deal with those. The only thing she could do to Fioro was just throw body kicks to try to slow her down, but Fioro would get in, hit her twice, and get out, and there was nothing there for it. And that's been a problem with Mayra her entire career. She really needs you to stay directly in front of her when she's striking to get off offense against you, because she just doesn't throw enough. We saw Holly have some issues doing that against Ketlin Vieira, but Vieira was countering her every time she entered. I've never seen Mayra throw a counter in her career. I just feel like if Holly decides to stay to the outside here, she's going to easily pick her apart. Legitimately, I think she easily covers the price standing here. Obviously, if the body kicks of Bueno Silva are hurting her and impacting her, and they may, she does kick hard, I think she'll go to the clinch. But even there, I'm not sure she'll take her down. She might just do the Holly thing where she just holds her on the fence and dominates her there, lands clinch strikes and holds her there. And if she does take her down, the last thing I'll add is we know how dangerous Mayra is on bottom, but Holly's takedowns are mostly of the upper body variety, which means a lot of the time she's not ending up in your guard. She's ending up in side control or in half guard. And if she's getting to those positions, I just don't think there's a lot Mayra's going to be able to do off her back here. Again, I don't think she should go to the ground here. I think it would be unwise because I think there's a huge gap on the feet. But if she does, I still can't. I mean, how high can you really put Bueno Silva submission pre-fight here? 14%, 15%? I feel like that's giving her best chance here. And if they go to a decision, I feel like her only, short of Holly just showing up like a corpse here 3 months after the Yana fight, I feel like Silva's only real path in a decision is a very grimy, close decision where she lands harder shots and edges it, kind of like the Vieira fight. But the Vieira, Ketlin Vieira, it would be like minus 400 against Mayra Silva. Like, it's just, yeah, I just personally don't, I respect how dangerous a finisher Silva is. I just personally don't think her process is one that works when you reach the upper levels of a division.
So 2 things to add. One, she does not have a knockdown at all in the UFC.
Yeah. She does hit hard, but.
Yes. 2, imagine, and I was just thinking about this, imagine this is our main event instead to get the people going. Mayra Bueno Silva, Priscilla Cachoeira, 5 rounds.
That's way better. That would be way more fun.
It's a banger.
It's
a banger. That's a banger.
How has that fight not happened is the real question.
That's what
I want to know.
Dude.
That would be actual fun.
Dude, imagine that in Brazil. Imagine that in Brazil. 5-round main event.
Yeah, it would be awesome. And to be clear, I know a couple sharp people that are on the Silva side, and I respect it. I just really think if Holm fights intelligently, she really should have this pretty easily here. Maybe it's a trap and I'm getting stuck in it, but
yeah, I'm curious to see what not that I think they priced the like decision only, finish only, stuff like that. But yeah, okay.
I would imagine finish only favors Silva.
Yeah, it does. Right? Yeah. No, finish only is minus 175 for Silva, and then decision only for Holly's minus 330.
What is Holly's submission?
Holly's submission on DraftKings is 22-1.
I have this, like, I'm not saying I think it'll happen, but like I mentioned, and you watch how Mayra responded on when you watch, the way she responded, Mayra under Fiort, she's gonna give up position. Like, I don't think it's an impossible out, especially if she gets tired. She's never been in a 5-round fight before. I don't think it's like that crazy that she could get subbed like down the stretch of this fight.
Here you go, John. How about this? Well, you could just play the fight by finish too, plus 330, or fight by sub, plus 330. Fight ends in sub, plus 330.
That's actually not bad. I don't mind that at all.
Yeah,
because that's basically yeah. What's Silva sub?
You would hope for a bigger number on that though, because I think that's pretty low. 350.
It's about right. I mean, maybe even a little too high, honestly. But yeah. I love Holly this week. We'll see what happens. Me making my second largest women's MMA wager ever on a 41-year-old woman, who's a favorite. Could be a disaster. Not financial advice, guys. Like, Don't blame me if you tail and this doesn't hit. But I feel good about it. I really do. So we'll see what happens. Anything to add before we close it out here?
No. Derive Park, probably the highest level fight we got of of the night. Should be a banger.
Is that true? That can't be right. Is
Gotta be. Unless you want to say the McKinney Sadov.
No.
And I wouldn't either. So yeah, I
Maybe
gotta say
Madalena Hafez, because Hafez at least is like a serious black belt, and I mean,
Nah, I say Park Derive.
Christ, that is.
Yep. Park Derive.
All right. Well, It's not the best card ever, guys. It is not the best card ever, but we make do with what we got. We got a good card next week, though. We got a London
should be
card
exciting. We got some fun fights here. We got Prado and Itar. That should end.
You know what's interesting? What made the 290 card so special is usually when you have a bunch of high level fights, finishes don't happen that often, and there were finishes left and right at 290. And usually it's these lower level shit cards where people are getting finished left and right because everybody sucks. So we could get a bunch of finishes here, you know.
True.
So but let's root for it. It's a shame that they can't just move up the TV times if the finishes come quick.
Dude, that's crazy. Until you said that, I was like, "You're kidding!" I could not believe the main card started at 10. That's crazy.
Insane. I legitimately,
I
told my wife's like, "What time's UFC?" This is how I found it out, and I checked my phone this morning, and I was like, because I was like, "Oh, don't worry about it, honey. Like, I don't even care if I miss this card." And I was just like, "Oh my god." So it's like, especially as someone with 2 kids, it's like, I'm going to get done with a 25-minute Holly Holm fight at 1:30. I won't be asleep at 2, and then I'm going to have my kid in my room at 6 a.m. Like, that is it's worth it for a pay-per-view. It is not worth it for Holly Holm and Mayra Bueno Silva. But anyway, guys, that'll do it for the show tonight. If you like the show, drop a like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it. It would help us out a lot. If you want to drop a comment for the algorithm, we'd love that as well. Maybe a little share, just putting it out there in the world.
For the boys.
Yeah, good luck this weekend on your bets. Yep. If you're tailing, if you're fading, should be a fun card. Nah, maybe.
Should be an all right card.
Anyway,
maybe.
It's MMA. I'm excited for it. We'll see you guys next week. Same time. Much better card for London. Take it easy, guys. Peace.